Good morning, Mark.
Hello, Jens.
Yes, Ariel.
I'm well. Hello, Ariel. This is a bit of a cruel time for a lot of people on the West Coast, but
Brutal. Early.
well, I mean, I'm used to it, but most people aren't.
Yeah.
Um,
And I lived in LA. I did the same. My day started at 5.
yeah,
Now, East Coast.
Matthias, hello.
Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link to the meeting minutes into the chat because I'm not certain of my ability to sort of talk and take notes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you can hear, Mano.
Hey guys, for some reason my camera is just not working. How about this? Yes, it's working now.
Right.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. All right. So the minutia we can take care of right away before waiting for more people to join. So I was going to ask, maybe someone other than me knows here, if we're going to use GitHub for any of our documents. Like I was thinking about dropping requirements into GitHub as an MD file, but I don't not so sure which repository I'm supposed to use. If I try to use the consortium's governance one, then it's well, it's not letting me. I think I have permissions. So Yagesh created one, but that's under his own private GitHub account. I don't think that's appropriate either.
Hello, I'm just joined, Mark.
Hi, Yagesh.
Right. So I have a document which is not public. It's a public repository. You're asking me about something. I'll
Yeah,
just
but
join.
yours, I believe, you created a repository, but it's under your account. And I
Yes,
think if we're
for
gonna
that is for
use
temporary. Yes.
right. So, and if I try, I don't know if governance link under now the consortium in GitHub is the right place to put our requirements in. I'll just you know what, I'll ask Rianne. So I'm not, if nobody has a ready-made answer. Another question, sort of my usual question, is if we're going to draw diagrams. I just discovered that if you want documents like Google Docs to convert cleanly into like markup files, MD files, then we should be using like something that can use like SVG format. I don't know what
Yeah.
graphing software can use that. Maybe somebody has a ready like quick answer. I was supposed to draw some diagrams so last week and I didn't.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. Can we, by any chance, use like mermaid diagrams? I'm not sure how they render in Google Docs, but in GitHub, you just write them as a code in Google Docs, I think. Sorry, in GitHub Markdown files. And I think they render. I'll try to look up a reference just real quick.
Okay. Is it open source software? Is it like?
Yes, it's open source. I mean, there is a learning curve if you're familiar with PlantUML. It's like I think evolution of that. But it's really.
Sorry.
I pasted the link in the chat. So basically, there's a syntax, and then it kind of renders natively, I think, within GitHub and in various places. So if there is an add-on, as Bob says, I think that might be a good candidate.
Okay. All right. Well, tell you what, so we can move forward here. Please put your suggestions in maybe mailing list. All right. So let's see. So I proposed a number of topics for today's talk. So there is only one thing here that's legitimately pressing with the deadline, and that's the IETF Madrid. So last time, if you remember, we talked about starting to work with the Whimsy working group at the ITF, and we agreed, I believe, that the proper way to do that would be to introduce our requirements as an informational draft in time for the Madrid ITF meeting to consider it. So assuming that's still the plan, I just wanted to understand, and Yogesh, you're like one of the more experienced people here, probably not the only one. I want to understand how we're going to go about it and put in place some kind of schedule and responsibility around it, so that you know, we can track it and know it's going to be done on time.
Yeah. So we need to create a repository with the bare bones stuff to prepare a draft in ITF format, the right format. Where do you think shall we put that kind of?
The repository, I'll ask Rian to create a repository for us.
Okay, and then I will start working on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but then there is the bare bones document. So every informational draft has a certain number of sections. There is like
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
that. I assume is pretty easy. And then is your intent then to take some form of our requirements and just transfer them wholesale into the informational draft, or is there going to be some other like
So
editing involved?
last time we discussed, we'll add some practical use cases as well, right? So we need that as well as the requirements to start with, and then we can see how time permits. Do we want to change the scope to something more than that? But we can start with that as a bare minimum thing. We'll try to share something which I tried to kind of do. Let me see.
Okay. Do you want me to stop sharing?
No. Just that's okay.
I just shared. I believe you should be able to see my screen now. The requirements. So these are the requirements, right? So, you know, I don't know if we want to, talk about like portable and standards based. I think that's kind of assumed. This is why we're working with Whimsy, so we don't necessarily need to, have that in there. But the rest we need to take a look.
So I did added some kind of a template. I just pasted. I thought of working something. I pasted in the chat window. So
okay. All right. So I'll tell you what. How about by next meeting? Let's take a look at some draft of that, so we can move now and discuss other topics so we can move along. Okay. So. All right, so this is the next thing on the list for today. I kind of tried to move in a way that we get like quick decisions first. I don't want to be stuck on a really long discussion right away. So the quick one, and I wanted to sort of poll the group and see what you feel. So credentials usually, right, as we've seen them used in the real world, use the passport model, where the passport is the credential, right? I'm now talking RATS architecture. So you go through the attestation process and you obtain your credentials, which would be the passport, and then you present your passport to your relying party. The relying party then makes the authorization decision. RATS architecture also defines the background check model, where I presume, if I remember correctly, you contact the relying party first, and then the relying party then does the background check on you. And I just don't know if that can work with workload credentials. I just wanted, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just overseeing something, and I wanted us to have a decision in the reference architecture. Are we supporting it? In which case, how? Otherwise, do we just simply punt on it?
So how do you see the passport model flow? If you can explain me as what you see as the best, and then I can say.
If somebody held my, feet in the fire and say, you must, I would effectively broker the entire credential, procurement exchange through the relying party. I just don't know if that makes any sense.
But Mark, is it about because if you say credential, then yes, this is indeed a bit of a pickle. But
Yeah.
if you just exchange the word credential for identity, I could imagine you giving me a claim as the relying party of your identity, and then I, following the background check model, would be, validating your identity with a higher echelon, whoever that might be, and then I would kind of corroborate your claim. In that case, I think that would work. So if we kind of, go into very credential space as if something immutable as an evidence and already vouched for evidence of an identity, then I think the work is done.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a pivot to do, but with credential I struggle. If we kind of dial it up a notch and say we just deal with identity within a passport model, I think that's kind of a natural extension then.
Fair enough. Hank, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. This is Hank. So the background check model basically assumes that you are living in a normal world. Like you are going out, you interact with the service, and you have no idea how really who's the appraiser here, the verifier. So you don't the relying party comes, sorry, the tester comes along, and the relying party wants to interact with that, and now you basically don't know who to contact. The tester doesn't know what verifier is good for this appraiser. Then you do the background check, like literally, and that's why the term I think was minted. In the passport, you already have that attestation result presented. In the background check, you are providing the evidence that's confidential, and that has to be checked in the background. So you don't really know as a tester what verifier will appraise your evidence. That's okay, because sometimes, well, and the whole process design has happened. You can't know. There's so many of them, and the relying party might know because the tester contacts the relying party, and then there we can now establish the trustworthiness of the tester with some trusted verifier. So, but the trust is transitive, obviously, because the relying party is choosing that verifier for you. And again, in some establishments, you might want to be the tester that has that. We can punt on this in the workload trustworthy workload identification, maybe, because we could assume that always the relying party is the initiator of all this, and wants to understand something. The relying party goes to the tester, and the tester already has some pre-cached attestation result ready to immediately give to the relying party. But that is not always due to the process layer possible. That's why these two base models, I want to say, exist. And maybe in a trustworthy identifier scenario, the peer that wants to have more assurance about the trustworthiness of its remote peer uses the passport model. But I think in some scenarios, it's totally viable. That's not the assumption. So I think mapping a few user stories to these models helps. But I would agree that the passport model is intuitively, when you look at it at the first time, looks like the most applicable one. But I would not say that the background check model is therefore out of scope.
Okay. How prevalent is the background check model out there in the world? Like actually like I've seen it mentioned in the RAS architecture. I haven't actually seen it used personally.
In network equipment, for example, if one router talks to another router, it doesn't need to know the verifiers. It has to trust the router owner that probably supplies or knows a good verifier for it. And the router isn't interested in all the evidence stuff about the router. It's interested about, is my peer trustworthy?
Right.
And so then you cache these. Maybe on change, there must be some trustworthy mechanism. The difficult problem here is providing insight into the policy and configuration of how that happens. So there's some, I think, out-of-band agreement. There's a trust relationship here.
Right.
But a router can't just send its arbitrary evidence to someone and get that doesn't work. So routers need quick decisions between each others, and they want to exchange attestation results. So every router itself is responsible to create its own attestation results with some verifier from its trust domain, and thereby by choosing a routing path, hop next to you, you expect an attestation result coming from some verifier. And then you can examine that attestation result and, for example, realize, well, not so great for me.
Okay, so we need in the reference architecture document the interaction diagrams around credential procurement, etc. Well, would you be willing to do that work for the background check model? So you seem to understand it. And then, you could author that section for us to review.
I think I actually can do that. This is April, the Eastern holidays, and a lot of non-travel time, I want to say. Yeah, sure, why not? I can have a stab at it. It might not be great,
That's okay.
but it might be a start.
Right.
So
there is a couple of outstanding to-dos which I was hoping to do myself, like to basically illustrate the normal dance. Like you go to the verifier as an attester, and then you get attestation results. You take it to some sort of IDP, and you get back a credential. Take it to a relying party. So I was going to draw that, but if you could do the same for the passport check model, we could then do another pass to make sure the diagrams sort of have a similar look and feel.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think that's not a single person. As well, I will reach out to other parties, stakeholders, attendees, whatever, and try to form a small group.
Yeah.
Okay.
To talk about it. I think that's ultra useful, because otherwise I'm just working in my own head, and
Oh yeah. No, for
sometimes
sure.
I just work
We
that way.
have the mailing list, we have the Slack channel. It's just
Exactly.
it's only that I want to be able to cover and like we now have a very healthy attendance here, so I want to be able to cover multiple things, get like owners for them, so we can proceed like the faster we can accomplish this, the better. Zvonka, your hand is up.
Yeah, hi everyone. I haven't introduced myself so far. I'm with NVIDIA, and I'm leading the Kata and confidential containers work at NVIDIA. And one of the use cases we have uses the background check model for providing identities for a confidential mesh in a Kubernetes environment. So Henrik, we can work on providing a real use case example how to use the background check model with identities as a use case. We have a trustee, which is the attestation pipeline, which supports passport model and the background check model. So I can provide with some examples for how to use identities and both of the models with a real life example that we use upstream.
So
Sounds
fantastic.
Great.
This is great. All
and
right.
Hank, I can also kind of be part of the team. I can help you as well. So count me in. Yeah.
The more the merrier. And Swanko, I think. Hi, first of all, welcome. And also, if your email address is not known to all by I don't know, by reasons, if you could paste it here, if you're comfortable with pasting it here, I can include you.
You should have my email, and let me just.
I should. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, but let's use channels that are visible to all.
Yes.
Right. You can put like a little tag in the subject, so people can sort of self-filter. But whether you want to use the mailing list or the Slack channel, that's up to you, of course. But let's not form like email chains outside these two main channels, if possible.
Okay. Yeah, then I will use the do we have a list? Email
yes, we have a Slack channel and an emailing list.
Yeah, Slack and I are not the best friends right now. That's on me. I'm working on that.
Okay.
Company policies have changed, unfortunately. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. So The next topic on the list today, now we're moving very quickly. We're only 20 minutes into it. So I want to basically double click on this concept of provenance, right? So I want to understand what we're going to say in the reference architecture about provenance. And it's probably more complex than what I'm going to say right now. But at the simplest level, in a, for instance, in your SVID, the X59 SVID, which is a form of workload identity out there today in SPIFFE, you have a serial number, right? So credential is a serial number. In a if you were to express your credential in JSON, there is the JTI, so another sort of unique identifier, JSON token identifier. And the idea, certainly as written in, like there's a short note in the reference architecture, not in the main text of it, talks about how you could use this identifier to then query the credential issuer and say, I want to know more about, how this credential came to be. Now, there's a couple of different modes in which provenance can be checked. One is, of course, real time, where the relying party, again, I'm fantasizing right now. Maybe it's not going to come to pass, but the relying party is so paranoid about this $1 trillion transaction from this credential that it actually goes and tries and obtain additional information about everything that led up to the issuance of that credential, and perhaps make additional determinations. And the other model is more of an audit model. So something already happened, access was already granted, transfer was already completed, but we wanted to make sure that the credentials were, what policies, like for instance, you could have an audit where you look up somewhere, what policies were in effect, who approved it, why, you can effectively from provenance, you ought to be able to go as far as bills of materials for your credential, but it's effectively a shorthand provenance that allows you to not carry all of that information inside your credential, right? So we already started talking about this when we were discussing our charter, so this is not new, but I want to get to a point where we can author sensible content in the reference architecture about have sort of full discussion around it. And this is what I wanted to have today. I don't expect that we'll necessarily come to all the conclusions, but enough of a conversation that we can start drafting content and trying to figure out what the big rocks are and what might, what difficulties we might be encountering.
So first question I would ask, maybe a silly one, is are we talking a single provenance record of the credential being issued? Or are we talking like compound provenance records, one for the issuance of the credential and then tied with it a provenance record of the workload itself? I see one as being fairly static. I mean, as far as the workload, it doesn't change. It might be a single provenance record, maybe even external to us, instead of in terms of identities of the software being run. And then there is our engines issuing those identities, which might be even ephemeral. And I wonder, are we talking a single provenance record encompassing them all? Or are we kind of starting tracking our stuff at issue and only linking back to another lineage line, but we kind of consider that an external dependency?
Well, if you're asking me, I think that in the fullness, provenance can go deep. So by the time a credential is issued to a workload, a lot of things have happened, right? So it went through a compile chain, right? It had the third-party dependencies. There was a bill of material. Somebody, probably vouched for the security of the build chain itself, right? Then it went to the verifier, and the verifier did some work with some policies to map the reference values into attestation results. And so there was a number of decisions made there. And then it probably went to the IDP. Like we haven't drawn it all out, but whatever, there was a process. So, well, all was said and done, the credential was issued, and the provenance was somehow recorded, all of that stuff somewhere, and effectively the provenance in the credential, for practical purposes, because credential again needs to remain small, is a breadcrumb. But it's a breadcrumb that can lead to a fairly large data structure. Again, we're discussing it right now. I don't know, but this was my answer to your question, Hank.
Hey, this is really a great topic. Can I assert an idea and have you
Please.
indicate whether it's appropriate?
Please.
Okay, so coming out of NIST, we have NIST Special Pub 863. I think it's A, B, C, and D kind of thing, where it talks about identity
53
assurance
or 63?
levels.
63.
63, yeah.
Okay.
The identity assurance levels, which go to levels of verification on identity. And now it applies more specifically to people, but there are, I think, constructs for machine. Do we want to refer to that? And would you like me to dig it up and see what might apply?
So anything that's standards-based and ties to existing prior work, I think is good. We also talked about things like salsa, right? We need to sort of understand how we can tie into existing best practices, standards, etc. So yeah, I would
Okay.
say yes. I would
Okay,
say
I'll do a
yes.
little table on that for the group.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
One question I've been wrestling with is in another standards body I'm working, it's P2795, which has to do with an analytic exchange. And I'm trying to implement confidential computing attestations from the compute node. And I want to know how, and so we have this, how do I refer to these, the verifier guidelines to use in those standards?
What do you mean by verifier guidelines?
So remember we worked on the identity verifier guide last week.
So in the GRC SIG, there is a verifier governance pattern. And it talks about, it's a document that the TAC will be approving hopefully this Thursday. And again, the TAC mailing list has all that information. If you want me to dig it up right now, I can. But we talked about all sorts of things that you need to do in order to have faith or trust in, trust is a better word, that your verifier is in fact operating correctly. So, the history of policies, how it's being administered, the fact that it's, safeguards its keys, and like all the things I mentioned there. But I don't know if there's like a terminology to it. It's just a number of, oh, so many raised hands. Okay, Hank, you were first.
Yeah, I'm taking the Red's point of view, which is not super surprising, I assume. So we had an interesting discussion that you were mentioning salsa. We had an interesting discussion about the verifier behavior just recently, in the last month, and so you provide some kind of reference values, the golden measurements, the intended state, the good intended state of the attester, which the verifier, of course, needs. The verifier needs to understand the form and shape of the attester to appraise it. And then you have reference values to fuel the process, so the intended states that are like signed and faithfully good to believe. And I think these terms are not bad because it's all about believability. Yeah, you have to believe it as trust relationships. So these reference values come from somewhere, and there's provenance about, for example, that. and a fragment of salsa somehow has these they're called build artifact evidence. Evidence is a overloaded term, yeah. But when you build software, obviously you know what you're building. The build process can capture that, and as the output, you have an artifact, and you can create in that process a reference value for that artifact. So the provenance of that reference value and that build for that artifact, for example, would be some provenance. It's not about the whole identity of the thing, but it's about a component that it identifies the thing, so like the thing you want to be running. So for example, we have a lot of experience on the red side, and we're actually talking already to the Entoto community. Actually, if this Entoto attestations, I think they're called, which about provenance, how these values came to be, could be part of the verify input. Like if you need them, you not only get a reference value like this should be 1 or 2, but also why. Because there's a build process that created an artifact or a series of artifacts that are alternatives, variants. And then the CAP can say, okay, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of this build chain is acceptable for me, and we can show this due to the provenance of the reference value. That is very different, I think, from the provenance we are talking here, and that's why we really needed like a small, I don't know, landscape, I guess, to understand which provenance is useful where. And I think for the verifier, from a REST perspective, that provenance is for example, a value add.
Right. Mateusz? Oh, Mateusz lowered his hand. Okay. So
yeah,
yeah,
because I thought I was speaking, but unfortunately I was speaking on mute. Sorry. First off, I mean, I want to say, Hank, what you just said, I stand by it entirely. I was doing kind of internal research for the same, but I have the same conclusions, and I also think, at least in total attestation format, I mean, give or take quorum adherence is something we should absolutely have a serious look at. Maybe not adopt as is, but this is definitely a pretty big data point, and I think this complements the picture. It doesn't give us a solution on the platter, but it complements the picture, and I think we can synergize with it. But what I wanted to add to this pool of ideas at this point is, I think what we should think about is whenever, or in most cases, when provenance is being discussed, it goes hand in hand with the concept of transparency. I mean, all those provenance vehicles, again, like Salsa, for example, they also tend to, have binary transparency on their agenda, and things like, certificate transparency, binary transparency are out there in terms of verifiability of issuance of certain, physical world or digital world artifacts. So I'm not opinionated yet. I'm not sure if our identity is something which would, require scrutiny over something other than the relying party, or maybe the relying party itself would require extra proof of it being issued and trackability of it. But as just food for thought, I think we should also think of whether transparency, meaning have like a transparency log storing evidence of each and every workload credential issued and how it came to be. I think it's something to chew on and have a position towards, either for or against.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yogesh?
Yeah. I think I kind of support what I don't know how to say your name. Is it Matthews or?
It's Mateusz in Polish because I'm out of Poland, but you're pretty close. I don't mind. So
Okay,
whatever
sorry
works
about
for
that.
you. No,
Yeah.
don't you worry.
So I think I fully support that, because transparency is something which brings auditability aspect into it, and the whatever policy you want to apply on the credential issuance, and whatever you have done, the actions, set of actions before issuing the credential, if they can be transparently audited, that kind of gives the layer of trust one level up in the chain. So I support that concept, and I think we should definitely look into that as well. Yeah.
Manu?
Yeah, I want to add my support to that. Essentially, the whole provenance or the lineage should indeed be, preserved. It should be tamper-proof, right? Immutable, and otherwise it's worthless. And it should also be confidential because it's going to contain a lot of potentially sensitive business data and or private data. So it shouldn't leak information in and of itself. It should only be available to the parties that should be authorized to access that repository in some way. And so from our perspective, in the infrastructure that we have built, we basically see that the combination of all these requirements leads to the necessity of a hierarchical and recursive architecture that recursively use confidential computing for the verifiers, for the reference values, for the identities of the different parties that generate or contribute those reference values, the endorsements values. All of those things need to be thought of recursively in a way that maintain the chain of trust, as opposed to imagining that we're going to compose stuff after the fact without having built cryptographic chaining from the get-go. So I submitted a short document that explains how we approach the problem. I think it go back to the composability discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago. I was not there last week, so I don't know exactly how you guys, what you guys discussed, and I haven't had a chance to look at the video. But this concept of composability, I think, is intrinsic to all the conversations and the architecture that we're trying to, discover or uncover.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear confidentiality of supporting information, but also transparency. I suppose they can be made to work together, but
yeah. So essentially, it has to be accessible to the people who have, who are authorized, who have authority over that information.
Yeah.
But it has to be confidential to everybody else,
right.
because it contains very sensitive business data.
Practically, I would agree with you. Yes. Okay. Any other thoughts? I'm trying to figure out what what to write down in it yet. So far, I'm not exactly sure, but I took a number of notes. It's as I expected. It's a pretty big domain, pretty complex, and we'll need to decompose it carefully so that we can divide it and conquer it. Any other thoughts on that that we can take into consideration? So what I'm hearing so far is we have a number of standards. There is one from NIST, there is SALSA, there is Entoto, from which we can draw wisdom and inspiration. There is a number of requirements, like Manu articulated, that the provenance or information that can be used to assess provenance it needs to be preserved and tamper-proof and confidential. And then there is a whole notion of composability, which I also, it's inherent because, again, multiple parties collaborated on the creation of that credential. So that's the type of composition. So it needs to be decomposed to go back and make decisions. I'm not exactly sure we're yet at a point where we can say this will be the algorithm you use to assess provenance, but certainly a lot there, certainly a lot that we can research and write about. I'm trying to think in real time how to move forward on this. Seems like a lot of reading is needed. You said that, Manu, that you have a paper. Can we get access to that paper?
Yeah, I put it in the gap analysis, although it's not really a gap analysis. I describe in a couple of pages the approach that we took to try to solve this problem for our infrastructure. And so I put in the gap analysis folder. And the outcome, when the thing to me from very early on when I started looking at confidential computing, the thing that puzzled me was indeed that if a relying party wants to rely on the output of a verification process from an attestation, right? So there's three things that come into play. There's the genuineness of the evidence itself. There's the authenticity and correctness of the verifier code that does the comparison of evidence within the reference values. And those three things come into the equation for the relying party to be able to rely on, avoiding the word trust, to rely on the output of the verifier. And if any one of these three things has not been itself verified with the same cryptographic strength, right? What is the point of all the efforts that we put in creating chips that have hardware-based evidence, generation capability? So really what puzzled me at in the first Confidential Computing Summit, for instance, was a lot of the discussion saying, we have endorsement values coming from somewhere, we have reference values coming from somewhere, but nobody answered the question as to how can you rely on those things if you don't actually know where they're coming from? So that's where this hierarchical recursive, the inception, ratception, the rat's nest, which I totally agree with, is in fact, I believe, a necessity for the CCC reference architecture, right? Of course, organizations can do whatever they want, and they can, decide to stop the chain of trust wherever they want. But from a reference architecture, I think the intent for the CCC should be to just say this is the optimal, recursive way that we can, capture endorsement values at at manufacturing time, that we could capture reference values from the CI/CD pipeline at the creation of the pieces of code, and that the verifiers themselves are verified by other verifiers, and that the verifiers are ultimately verified by an initial verifier, so that the trust base is as small as possible. It is the initial verifier that triggers the chains of verifications and pulls all that information together so that we have the composability, we have the repository in a way that is cryptographically chained and fully verified. Otherwise, what's the point of having those chips, right? That secure everything in hardware. So anyway, that's, I wrote a few pages, more than happy to answer questions about it, about how.
Yeah, I still don't see where those pages are.
Oh, I thought they are in the gap analysis folder.
Gap analysis. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking at the chat window for today. No,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't put the link in the chat window. I put it directly in I think in your, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to map this into sort of a set of tasks that we can take on, because again, we're meeting on a weekly basis, so we have an opportunity to move fairly quickly, but I also want to make sure that we move in the right direction, right? So, what do you think can be done about this in the next week before we meet next time?
You're asking me? About what?
Well, I mean, just not about you, but like, I guess maybe it's the question to the group. What can we do about this in the next few days? Like, certainly reviewing what Salfin and Toto offer, what this NIST 863 does, like basically trying to figure out, how we can construct a proposal that is based on existing best practices, or what we can contribute. I usually what I do is I start, I start writing things down. right? I start trying to decompose things into like maybe, what would be the sections of the provenance document? What do I need to address? Maybe that's a good starting point. But yeah, go ahead.
I think we have kind of coming up to a conclusion on the requirements, right? Or if I understand correctly.
Yeah, probably we need a separate section. We'll probably need to have a separate discussion of what requirements to provenance themselves are.
Yes.
Yeah, and that can be written down and discussed, right? That would be a good that would be a good sort of side document to work on and then incorporate into the reference architecture. And another quick thing. So Yogesh, I looked at the link you put in the chat, and I think at one hand we said for Madrid IETF we're just going to say what the requirements to workload identity are to make it trustworthy. But then your document is like a whole reference architecture there, which is probably a little too early for Madrid.
Yeah, I started it when we didn't have the decision. I have yet to edit it. I will remove the architecture sections.
Okay.
And then
right, because we'll do it, but hopefully by the Montreal ATF we'll have more meat on the bones. Okay.
True.
All right, so that was a lot already. I don't know if we should even tackle the reverse proxies today. I think that may be a little bit of an overload. We could probably push this off till next week. So to recap, we will be working on this IETF draft for Madrid. There is the background check model. Hank and a few folks with Hank will provide some kind of initial write-up that we can discuss next week. That would be fantastic. And then the final one is let's come up with a set of requirements around provenance. And maybe Manu and I could, or anybody else could probably do a Slack discussion or a mail discussion, just to try and understand what are we trying to accomplish here. What would be success?
Mark, can I show something and ask if the group believes it's valuable?
Yeah. Please let me stop sharing here.
Okay. Okay. You cannot start screen share while in participant. Okay. It said something about I can't do screen share. Why is that? Let's see. Okay. Here we go. All right. Can you see? Please forgive me for engaging the ChatGPT. And hopefully, okay. So I want to adapt 863 for machine identity assurance levels. And so I can get this to shrink. How do I get this to shrink? Give me a second. Okay, sorry, it's going to be a little small. And I want to know if this is something that is useful for the group. But the concept is in person identity, we have information assurance level 1, the I is identity assurance level 2, and identity assurance level 3. They typically relate to what degree do I verify the person really exists, right? Before granting them either a certificate or granting them an account. And this would be stuff that IDPs would adhere to. So I've tried to extend this to this notion of machine identity, for which 863 does not address. So I was wrong. I thought it would, and I've asked my MITRE folks to weigh in. The question here for the group is this kind of thing valuable for this notion of identity proofing in the context of our machine identities? And
Well, we're
if
not
we want,
talking machine identity, we're talking workload identity, just to be sure, because separately, we'll be having a discussion separately, not today, about how to combine workload identity with claims about the
Machine.
hosting device, our machine, right?
Okay.
So that's for another day. We'll
Okay.
definitely need to come up with interaction diagrams around that. Like the two need to be joined. That just
Okay.
fact of
Okay.
life,
I'm
right?
sorry.
And some kind of flexible deployment architecture of that, because with workload moving from one machine to another, how do you connect the machine to the workload and then again reconnect it when the workload gets migrated is a separate topic, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So what should I do
But
with this kind of
the
content?
the concepts may be reusable to an extent,
Yeah.
right? So I mean,
Okay.
I certainly see some value in maybe specifying assurance levels. Too early to decide, but I see lots of bits and pieces here that could be reused.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to extend this to workload identity.
Mhm.
And then see, would you mind if because I struggle to get into the site and add stuff. Can I just send you my file outputs?
You should be able to. So we have our trusted workload identity folder in Google. We can start like a draft document in there. So it's probably best not to have one Uber document that's active with all sorts of things at the same time. So let me drop that in the chat.
Could I just send you these two file outputs and have you put them where you think it's appropriate?
Certainly, yeah, you can email me, but best like long term is to have access to this folder and then put your content in. I can do it for you like once.
Okay.
But
Does the group, so Mark, you think there's some value does the rest of the group agree?
I think there's value to it. I think there's, I think we got to go case by case, right? Because we're talking about enforcing a workload policy for attestation against, hardware root of trust. So I see some aspects that could be beneficial, but I'd like to dig into that more.
Okay,
On
very good.
What you have here.
Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
all right. All right, I don't think I have anything else today. That was a lot already. So I would say I will try and compile the meeting minutes to the best of my ability, but also please, if take a look at the meeting minutes document, right? This is the thing that we keep track of all the discussions and make sure that no important bits are lost. And by next week, we'll have hopefully some additional content that we can review based on the discussions that we've had today.
Mark, there were a couple requests in terms of getting access to the Confidential Compute Consortium Slack. How would we go about that?
Slack, I don't administer.
I do administer. So sorry, what was the problem with that? Are you not part of the CCC consortium?
We are part of the CCC consortium, but I do not have a Linux Foundation or Cosmian email.
I can add to that. I mean, I faced that very same problem recently. There is apparently two links to join. If you follow just from the main page, if you follow to the direct channel, then it takes you to some bizarre join page, which asks you for one of those two domains. However, when you backtrack to the main page, and then there is in the submenu now, they've moved it actually. If you follow the join something link, I mean, you explicitly have to click the join link on the CCC website, not go through the channel and then exercise the built-in Slack join capability. It should just allow you in without asking for any email domain or anything like that.
Okay.
So
I'm
it is a
looking
bit of a
for-
pickle, but look for like a top-level join link, and feel free to reach out through the mailing list or whatever. If that doesn't help, doesn't work for you, I think.
Is that the confidentialcomputing.io? that you
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm on here. I'm looking to see where I don't see anything around the Slack channel.
It's in the sub menu somewhere. Let me try to find it for you actually.
Okay.
Resources get involved, and yeah, click here, and I hope I will be able to snatch the link. Try this one. It's pretty
Yep, that one worked. Perfect.
cool.
Alrighty. Okay, so very busy conversation today. Certainly made my head hurt. Thank you all for attending, and I will see
I
you
have
all.
a final parting comment. I have to highlight that there is the Easter holiday coming in Europe,
Mhm.
which allows for 2 working days to prepare anything next to day job. So you are highlighting the interest in having a result next week.
Yeah.
I'm rather hesitant to commit to next week, to be honest.
Okay. That's fine. We
Yeah.
will, completely understood. So we will, do as much as we can, at, at our weekly cadence. So if you don't have your stuff ready for next week, then, then 2 weeks from now. We'll still have plenty to discuss. Like there is no shortage. There is no shortage of topics.
Exactly. Okay, but that's good to know. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for attending today, and I will see you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Hey, give me a second. Okay, today was a whirlwind and I got all kind of stuff working in West Virginia, so it was hard to get out today. But then Trump's talking about deporting to El Salvador people, US citizens. You hear that?
I did hear that on the car this morning, realizing their prison as citizens. Unbelievable. Okay.
Right.
Awful. So is that what you called about?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I was just distraught over it.
It's disturbing. It's disturbing that Trump isn't going the